the July 12th study session. Our first item up is a Leadership Academy debrief. It's a report from Dan Harris, our Events and Emergency Management Coordinator.
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much, Mayor Gamba, Council, for having me here this evening. My name is Dan Harris. I am the Events and Emergency Management Coordinator. I use he, they pronouns, and I can be reached at harrisd@milwaukieoregon.gov. Anybody still wants to talk to me after what we're about to do. All right, so for an overview of tonight's presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the background of this program, the class structure, our recruitment and retention plans, both what we tried and what we implemented, and then also future years. We're lucky enough to be joined this evening by two of our students from this year's Milwaukie Leadership Academy, and also via Zoom from my co-facilitator, Mr. Stefan Lashbrook. Steph, can you speak right now? I'm not actually sure.
I believe I can.
Yeah, you can. If there is anything that you'd like to say, please just jump right in, and we'll take it from there. And then also, of course, time for questions and feedback from the council. We have over here a variety of refreshments. So if I think probably after the discussion period, this is intended to be a reception. This is our first year actually doing this in the form of a reception. So if at any time anybody would like to access those refreshments, please do. Stefan, if you're able to access the refreshments, tell me how that happened.
Well, that's this right here.
All right, I would like to say also, you'll see on the screen here what one of our Zoom classes looked like. So several of the pictures, in fact, all of the pictures from here on out are from our very first year. But I am optimistic that the next time that we do this class, we'll be able to get some more good in-person pictures. I didn't use the Zoom pictures because, well, here we are. All right, so program background, we started this in 2019, and the inaugural session 2019 to 2020 was cut short by the COVID-19 pandemic. This program is similar to leadership academies. They're called a variety of things, hosted by other cities and municipalities around the country, I suspect around the world. What we do here is that we have monthly sessions in which members of the wider Milwaukie community can come in and hear from city staff and also from visiting counselors and from our city manager who stopped in for the first session about how it is that local government functions in Milwaukie, what it is that we do, what it is that we don't do. We also were lucky enough to be visited by Greg Heemer of the Milwaukie Historical Society, who told us about the city's history. The goal of this fundamentally is to create accessible and transparent government. The idea is that the more comfortable people feel understanding how it is that their government functions, the more they will be able to advocate for their causes, the more that they will be able to come in and get involved in various capacities. A typical class, again, these were conducted one night a month, generally on the third Wednesday of each month. A typical class would be social time from 5:30 to 6, give everybody an opportunity to mix and mingle and talk to their neighbors and fellow community members. We do a housekeeping session and then get into one of our two presentations, followed at the end by my co-facilitator's favorite session, the aha moments, an opportunity for people in the class to say, aha, I learned this in tonight's class. It's also a good review. As I said, we did have some guest panelists as well, not just department directors joining us. In terms of recruitment priority, we wanted to diversify participation in civic life. And so to do that, we reached out through a variety of venues listed here. I do want to say I was particularly pleased with the outreach efforts at the library and rather Milwaukie Center, singular. We tried something new this year. We sent out bilingual flyers in English and Spanish through Wichita Center bags. The Wichita Center over the summer was distributing lunches and also school goods. And so we worked with them. I had asked for the opportunity to go and table there, but they let us know that because people were receiving assistance with these bags, they wanted to make sure nobody felt stigmatized, but still we did some passive recruitment that way. And then, of course, leaned on our prior student distribution list. I should say that those flyers were also distributed to Milwaukie High School, to Clackamas Community College, and to the Portland Waldorf School in Milwaukee. This did not generate the recruitment outcomes that we had hoped for. It was a great class, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise, but it was a largely homogeneous group. Once again, primarily white, college-educated homeowners. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having white, college-educated homeowners involved in government. That is a sizable percentage of Milwaukee's population. I will say that we last year were able to recruit a significantly more racially and ethnically diverse class, and that did not happen this year. And so I'm really scratching my head. We expanded our outreach and we're less successful in that way. So we're looking at ways that we can maybe revisit that. I'm visiting with the Equity Steering Committee next month, and we're primarily going to be talking about our events program, and I don't want to get too bogged down in that right now. But something that I do want to bring to that committee is, hey, we've got this program. We'll say tangentially related to events. What ideas? What am I missing? Who am I missing? I will say that we did have some diversity of age, but these were all adult participants this year. We were not able to recruit any youth members.
So your report said that, do you want me to save questions to the end?
Please,
okay.
Please.
Said that you'd had like twice as many signed up than actually showed up the first.
There were about 24 signed up and 16 or 17 showed up. So there was a pretty significant attrition right before the first session. And that was a variety. One person moved to New Jersey, no accounting for moving to New Jersey. But also just a variety of people who said, hey, I'm not actually available for class on Wednesday nights. One person signed up not realizing that their NDA board member duties were on the same night. We really work hard to deconflict this with other boards and NDAs, but there are a couple that meet on that night, and it's hard to break. Others just, hey, I signed up for this, and I'm busier than I realized I was going to be. I signed up for this, and I had hoped that COVID would be wrapped up by the time that we got started on it. So there were a variety of reasons that people gave for why it was that they weren't able to participate. Councilor Beatty, but yes, we did have a pretty significant attrition between between applications and the actual class.
So I guess I was curious, and I know you're probably going to talk about hybrid meetings and stuff, but yeah, to what extent was the lower response rate, Zoom fatigue?
Sure.
Although some people prefer the Zoom. So, I mean, there's people on both sides of that. But I just was, curious about that.
No, I mean, I think there is something to that. And I mean, I'll let the students speak for themselves, the class participants speak for themselves. But I mean, there was definitely a certain amount of Zoom fatigue as we went into 2021, 2022, the second and third years of life on Zoom. I don't know that was all of it, but I think that was a considerable piece of it. I heard from 2 or 3 of the folks who dropped out that it was, oh, I thought this was going to be in person. I had hoped this was going to be in person. And to be honest, I had hoped it was going to be in person too. The only session that we were able to do as a hybrid was our very last session. And I think that went reasonably well, although we did have some trouble getting, and Richard can speak to this with the social period during that class. Not quite sure how to have our Zoom participants interact meaningfully with a room full of people. Hard to have casual conversation if the voice on high. Mr. Lashbrook, the voice on high.
The voice on high.
There it is.
Dan, I appreciate everything you've said so far, but I wonder whether any of the people who didn't show up availed themselves of the opportunity to look at the recorded versions. Do we have any way of knowing that?
That's a great question. I don't think we have a way of knowing for sure who looked at the recorded versions, but a thing that would have been good for me to check prior to this class is what kind of numbers we were getting on our YouTube views. Or prior to this session. I can look into that and circle back.
Just one other thing I would add, because you noted that we seem to have a different demographic in this class than in the last two, for whatever reason. But one other change that was real apparent to me was that this class had a majority of members who moved to the community in the last couple of years. That surprised me, and that's not what we've seen in the past. But I thought it was great. It's just interesting.
That's a great observation, Stefan. Thank you. Yeah, and that is certainly true. We did have a lot as a percentage of new Milwaukeeans, and I'm using that in the broad sense for Milwaukee.
So it looks like you had 30 to 60 views of most of it really ranged, but
30 to 60.
30 to 60
Thank
of
you.
the different videos, yeah. The first one with the mayor was the most viewed. It was because of the introductions or, yeah.
That might be it.
That's why there weren't any after that. They're just like, oh, that was not worth watching.
So I will say that an end of course survey was distributed by email. So we had 17 students who attended at least one class, and then 6 of those 17 responded. Students were generally satisfied with the class structure, with the pacing. People reported being more interested or better informed about the way that Milwaukee's government functions and what it is that the city does. Five of them, students generally report an increased interest in becoming involved, and then 1 did actually join her NDA's board. So not a whole lot of direct connection between this program and people signing up for boards and committees this year, but there we have it.
This might be more make work than it's worth, but I would be curious to sort of do a longitudinal look at, people from the first Leadership Academy class. Do they then end up, 3 years down the road, it's the time that they can apply for a board and a commission. But just getting a sense, because I think oftentimes it's just not the right time.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to know that.
That's true. I do think also with the shifting to the annual recruitment, last year I made a pretty significant point of saying, okay, and these are the openings, these are the boards, commissions, and I think at one point we had a planning commission, or rather boards, committees, and I think commission openings. So if you would like to apply, now is the time. I don't think that that's any kind of an indictment or criticism of the annual recruitment. I just think that it's a factor.
Yeah, well, and talking with Scott about that whole process, I know that there was a lot that we learned from how this first year went, and that it'll be done differently next year in terms of really telling the story of where are the openings and here's how you can connect, and having more lead time to do that. So I hear you and underline that it's not necessarily the recruitment process, it's we didn't give it enough time and we were learning, so.
And can I interject something here? You actually, it's a little bit more, I think it probably happened after the survey. But,
Excuse, do you mind coming up?
Oh, yes.
I don't mind, thank you.
And please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rich Nippon, and I, as explained before, I'm an interloper from Oak Grove. I'm on the Oak Grove Community Council. Since the class and since probably the findings, I have joined the Clackamas County Emergency Preparedness Council and the CCI, the Citizens for Community Involvement. So your statistics are a little bit better than it shows there. I think there was a cause and effect. The class gave me a good overview of how things work, even understanding that I'm not in Milwaukie, even if I address my mail that way.
Go. Thank you. Actually, if you, I mean, we're almost to the student voices. If you'd like to hang out.
Okay.
Future years, I will tell you, we tried that hybrid class. I think there is room for refinement there. Not a bad first effort, but as we move into a hybrid model, it's what we've gotten in the past from class members is that for some people, having the Zoom option really is the only way that they're able to attend, whether that's because of childcare or because of the time that they get off work and they're needing to commute and join remotely that way. So I think it is important that we keep the hybrid class model. As long as we keep the Leadership Academy going, the hybrid class model should be a part of it. It's really well suited institutionally to hybrids. I do think probably in the future, the way around the social period might just be, hey, if you're joining for Zoom, please join for the class. It's a little chaotic with the social period otherwise. Or if we get enough Zoom members, maybe they can have their own Zoom happy hour. Lots of ways to deal with that. Cohort or social hour, excuse me. Cohort and drop-in model. We've opened it up again. This year, there was only the one in-person or the one hybrid opportunity, but the idea was that members who had actually registered or applied for the class would be able to come in person if they wanted to, and anybody else could join via Zoom. And that's just for planning purposes, making sure that we've got, when we do provide food for the class, that we've got enough food, we know who's coming, we're able to distribute the location effectively. And I think that that's worth coming back to. We moved this year to having purely voluntary discussion groups. Last year, we had these mandatory reading groups based on NDA. And the feedback we got was that really was not an effective use of the students' time. They didn't feel engaged by it. I will say, though, that we did have a reading group with 2 students participating in it, and Mr. Lashbrook led that. So, Steph, I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
I guess, just the obvious, it would have been better to have more than 2 people involved, but we did have some good discussions. And Morgan may want to address this. I think he's here tonight. But certainly it led to a positive relationship for me with Morgan because we're playing music together now.
There you go. I do, and I don't know, Morgan, are you in the Zoom call? No, he's not with us. That's okay. Registration versus application. I got a little bit of feedback that some folks were intimidated by the idea of applying. I don't believe that the Milwaukie Leadership Academy has ever turned away a single applicant. So I think in the future, the way to address this is to refer to it as a matter of registration. We just want to know who you are. We just want to know where you're coming from. Unless somebody is really acting out in the class, and even then it's a conversation, nobody's trying to be turned, we're not trying to turn anybody away. And then also future years, field trips, as we do move back to an in-person presentation or a hybrid presentation, more opportunity to go back and see the public safety building, to see some of our public works facilities, to see the library, to see how it is that the city's operating more firsthand. Please.
Can I jump in there, Dan? And I think, first of all, I agree with you about registration rather than application. And we've kind of leaned on that. Boy, there's a limit, maximum of 30 students, whatever. Well, that's just not really a problem. And I think we can move past that. But field trips, I've seen that work elsewhere where we've done a similar program, and that scored a lot of points with people. The other one, and this is one of my only real criticism of this whole program, is that I felt from the beginning that we need more city council involvement. I think it lends more gravitas to the whole thing, and I think it makes the students feel like, oh, this matters. This is important to this community, important enough that city councilors are taking the time to be with us. It worked pretty well in the first couple of years pre-COVID to have one counselor or two counselors join us during the dinner portion, between 5:30 and 6. But any involvement like that, I think, is really valuable.
Thanks, Stefan. At this point, it is our student voices section. So Richard has spoken. I'd like to, yeah, please. I'm going to step away here for just a moment and let the students speak.
First time we've met.
So I joined the MLA last year for the first time after moving to Milwaukee last summer, just as a way to get more involved in the community, maybe meet some neighbors, and also learn about the government structure, which was really interesting. And if I hadn't taken or went through the whole MLA cohort, MLA committee, I probably wouldn't have signed up for the Design and Landmark Committee. I wouldn't even cross my mind, but it kind of encouraged me to do so. So could potentially open up doors, and pretty excited to get a little bit more involved in the community. Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Great. What do you say?
Just a couple more things. I found the reading, and Stephen, I didn't know there was a reading group, so I didn't join it. So you might want to address how that word gets out on that. The readings that were supplied to us optionally before the meetings, I found to be very interesting, very thought-provoking, and led to better questions and better understanding of what we covered. So don't drop that, in my opinion. The other thing is that being that I'm from unincorporated Clackamas County, I think you might spend more time on describing how Milwaukie interfaces with the county, especially if you invite people like me from the unincorporated area. I'm still not real clear on where the lines are, and my understanding is that the lines are all over the place in different areas. So that would be good for me to find out. How Milwaukie interacts with the unincorporated Clackamas. Other than that, I really appreciate the opportunity that was afforded to me, and I can't thank you enough, because it did teach me a lot. I had told Ann before that my wife would move to Milwaukee in a moment from what I've told her about it, except for the packing. And I really appreciate the leadership, Mark, that you've given in the direction that Milwaukee's gone in, and I hope it spreads out to the outlying areas. It's always good to know where you live and know how it works, and know who does what and who's in charge of what and things like that. So, anybody wants to know anything about it, they can feel free to call me, and I'll tell them that they got to sign up. Thank you.
Well, and I think any of us would be happy to field questions that anyone in class continues to have. I certainly would. I serve on a bunch of committees at the county level. I'm always happy, perhaps happier than you would be, to talk about exactly that kind of question of how the city and the county relate to one another. So we're here. We're publicly available online. Just come find us.
Well, and also the county I believe the county does a leadership academy, and the sheriff's office used to do Citizens Academy or whatever they called it. I don't know if they still are, but I'm pretty sure I've seen that the county had a sign up for a leadership academy type thing recently. So
Yeah, the county has its own difficulties in communicating internally and externally. Being on a CPO, which the community council is, I started going to CPO summit meetings, which are mostly rural parts of Clackamas, and as you all know, Clackamas is gigantic. And so I've learned a little bit about what goes on outside of the urban area. There's a group exploring whether they want to incorporate or join and all those things. And I've been following them, learning a little bit. There were openings on the community Citizens for Community Involvement that apparently had been available for like 3 or 4 years, but they just never promulgated it. So members of the CPO Summit decided to offer themselves to be on that. So now we have a full house at the CCI, which in theory is an advisory board to the county. Not that they always listen, but at least we're getting somewhere. And about the only thing that I've heard about with the park and people not happy with how Clackamas was dealing with the park that they were going on and whatever's going on there is about the most I've heard about an interface between Milwaukie and Clackamas County. So probably some more public clarity on that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I can see, that aspect of the class being something worth covering, and it wouldn't have to be limited just to the county. It could be something that was, here's how city, specifically Milwaukie, interrelates with Metro, interrelates with the county, interrelates with the state. These are the crossovers. These are the different services that different places supply to us, or funds, where funds come from for certain projects.
Well,
I think that would be a very useful
Even the tolling,
evening. Yeah.
204 is like, 205 is like, and you first you say, well, it's not going to affect Milwaukie at all. But there's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit that people disregard now. It's going to get worse when they're trying to evade a toll and there's more traffic.
Yeah.
And it wasn't designed for more traffic, I suppose. So there's lots of things that, that could be brought into the class that aren't specifically Milwaukie, but affect it and need to be thought about.
Thank you both. I'm glad you took the course and spread the word.
Yeah, definitely will.
More the merrier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. Right. So with that, I will, it's not that it's not already open, but let's open it even further to see if there are any questions or comments from council.
I have a wish list,
Please.
or one wish. Would it be, I know people are at capacity and budget, but it would be great if we could offer this in Spanish only, so folks can show up and hear everything in their native language, or, any language, right? And just be able to get it all through their native language. That would be cool. I don't know how possible that is, but.
Yeah. It would be cool.
Yeah.
I think we should research that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that actually might be a better way to get more diversity. They'll feel more comfortable.
Sure. No, I think it's an idea that is obviously very good on its face. For the same resource constraints, Councilor Nicodemus, that you led with, I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but it's an interesting idea and it's a good idea. And I think it's definitely worth looking into further.
I mean, even if it were a more abbreviated version, to the extent it could be done, to the extent we have Spanish-speaking staff, that it could be done without a translator. That would certainly be the ideal
I think
world.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Counselor.
no.
I think the difficulty that we run into there is that we do have, I mean, we have members of staff who speak Spanish. Right now, we've got folks who are experts in their field from a variety of departments coming in and communicating directly in English. So I don't know exactly how it would work unless we had maybe some kind of live translation, which feels like a wider discussion. But I absolutely hear what's being said, and it makes a lot of sense.
Question. Is it possible to do like closed captioning on like the YouTube videos for different languages or non-hearing viewers?
For anybody listening along at home, the question was whether it would be possible to do closed captioning on YouTube in different languages, or for non-hearing, deaf, or hard of hearing viewers. I don't know technically in terms of the different language subtitles for the videos once they're done.
Not sure one way or another, just.
Yeah,
But as I said, Dan, I think it's worth some research.
it sounds like it. Sounds like I'm coming away with the
Homework.
I mean, Zoom generates the transcript, as we all see there. And
Which is hilarious reading.
well, it's actually amazingly accurate, I think. I mean, sometimes it's not, but I've been impressed by how close it is. So there is that could be translated, but yes, it would need some proofreading.
that it would.
Well, thank you again and always to Dan. And thank you, Stefan. For those of you who aren't aware of it, Stefan does not work for the city. He volunteers his time every year to make this happen. And we are indebted and grateful to his dedication to leadership and fostering a better understanding of how the city works in our community. So thank you.
Yes.
Well, you're quite welcome. I'm glad to do it. If I can add my 2 cents here as we approach closing this, I want to point out, as somebody who's a former city manager, that one reason why this program works is because this city has such an excellent staff. They're just month after month, the people in the class come away thinking, gosh, those people are really smart and dedicated to what this community has to offer. And so, Dan, you're on that list, because without Dan doing all the hard work, I wouldn't be able to do this. So anyway, my thanks to Dan and to all the staff people who take part.
Thank you, Stefan. With that, I don't know if there are anything else from council. I do want to point again to the still untouched refreshment table. We're a few minutes, we're about 25 minutes early, and Anne's got something to say.
No, I think if you're okay, it'd be nice to take a 15-minute break from camera and just give you all a chance to meet with the 2 individuals who came in and get to know them a little bit better. And then we would reconvene maybe at, I don't know, 6:05, 6:10, something like that. Does that work?
6:05 sounds good, yeah.
Perfect.
15 minutes. Sure. All right, then we will pause for 15 minutes. Cool, thank you. All right, we're back on. Our next item tonight is the beginning of a conversation around building energy. We have in our climate plan sort of 3 phases. The first is to be net zero electric by 2030, which we're well on the way towards. The second is to be net zero building energy by 2035, and the last is to be completely carbon neutral by 2045, all of which fall within the most recent IPCC recommendations. So tonight is the conversation getting it started to figure out how we get to net zero building energy by 2035. The predominant form of energy beyond electricity use in buildings is, of course, natural gas. So tonight we've invited our natural gas utility, Northwest Natural. They have a team of folks, and we've invited folks from the advocacy realm to talk about their thoughts. So we'll start out with Northwest Natural. Come on up.
You mind if I just pull one more chair up so we can?
Nope, bring as many as you like.
Okay.
This is your presentation.
Okay. And do you need me to say name and all that kind of stuff for the record first?
That would be helpful. Okay. Is that good? Okay. And then let me more things.
More cowbell, Nicole. More cowbell. Always so good.
Okay, there we go. All right. Sorry.
No worries.
Oh, sorry.
Well, thank you. If you guys want to
Can you guys hear us okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are mostly for the
For the folks
broadcast and the folks on Zoom and stuff.
So Mayor Gamba, Council President Hizzy, and City Council and staff, thank you very much for having us here tonight. I'm Nina Carlson, Government Affairs and Economic Development, and with me I have Kelly Dunyan, our Environmental Policy Manager, and Chris Craker, our Project Manager around hydrogen. And we really appreciate this time to talk with you today. I know that you have done some really great work with our partners, PGE. We look forward to hopefully having this being one of many conversations we have, because this is complicated stuff, and we really look to you guys to work with you to get it right the first time and work on decarbonization. So with that, we'll kind of kick it off. And to move it forward, is it just the arrows? I have to scroll it down. Where do you want me to scroll?
PDF.
Yeah. So you might want to just go
Yeah,
down.
sorry.
Okay, where are we here? Oops. Okay, so there we go. Before I kick it off too much, I like to kind of level set for folks about who we are and what we do. We happen to be your largest energy provider in the state of Oregon. We serve about 2.5 million people, and we've been in business for about 163 years, about a week longer than the state itself. And on any given day, we are providing about 70% of the space heat in our 2.5 million customers. That equals about 800,000 or 775,000 meters. And on those cold winter mornings, which is what we design our system for, we call that a peak time, we may be providing up to 90% of the space heat energy in our region. So that's a pretty big chunk of energy that we provide. We do that currently for about 6% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. And we feel that that's a fairly big amount of energy for a fairly modest amount of carbon emissions. However, our company believes in a climate imperative, and we are addressing decarbonization with a plan that we will share with you this evening called Vision 2050. And I believe when we spoke last, in sometime in, I think, mid-April, I sent that all to you guys with some additional information after a council meeting. And we're going to give you a real good flyover today, but I mean, this is tough stuff. I work in it every day and I'm learning more every day. So we're here to open this dialogue, talk a little bit about some of this stuff, and we would really like to spend additional time with you to go through the nuts and bolts. And one of the most important things that I want you to hear today is we're here to listen and understand where your concerns are, what your questions are, and how we can help the city of Milwaukee reach their climate goals. So, one thing I like to also ground folks on is people say a carbon neutral gas utility, that sounds crazy. What does that even mean? And I like to let people know that we've evolved really all along our time in business. At one point, we did lighting for the city of Portland. Then we brought town gas into the city. We switched out people's equipment to have gas fireplaces, gas ranges in homes. And probably a couple of things that we're most proud about is decoupling, which basically we were one of the first gas utilities in the nation to do that. And what that does is it removes the profit mechanism from the amount of gas that we sell. So we sell the gas as a pass-through, meaning that puts us on the same side of the table with our customer, so it doesn't hurt our bottom line to help our customers use less of our product. And that's probably one of the key tenets for our decarbonization plan is energy efficiency and the reducing of natural gas use overall. In fact, if you look today, and I wish I had the exact number for you today, but an average natural gas user today is using much less gas than they did in 1990. And with additional technology and efficiencies, we expect our footprint, and we'll show you probably our last slide, showing even with growth of our system, the average home will use less gas and we will be delivering less gas overall as we go forward due to energy efficiency and decarbonization and more technology. One of the other things that I'd like to really focus on is the modernization of our system. And that touches on something that happened today specifically. We are probably one of the newest and tightest systems in America. We have no bare steel or cast iron. It's all either polypipe or coated steel. And why that's important is two reasons. First of all, I know Mayor Gamba, you testified today in front of the PUC, and your concerns, I could feel your concern about the idea that perhaps in the value chain from the well to the burner tip you quoted an average of 10% leakage. We actually belong to a consortium called One Future, which is a group of, at this point, over 50 different member organizations throughout the value chain. And it allows us to work on best practices. And the key thing about that is the goal for the One Future value chain of where we purchase our gas, how it's extracted, how it's transported, how it's used at the burner tip, the emissions rate of that is less than 0.44%. So you were quoting 10%. We're in a consortium right now that beat our goal of less than 1% emissions, fugitive emissions, by 58%. And I'm happy to again send you the last 3 reports showing that we've consistently beat that year after year. So we take fugitive emissions very seriously, and we work every day to make sure that there's as little as possible about that. And that's one really important thing, because you don't have to decarbonize the molecules that you're not using. And so that's probably the number one pillar, is making sure we don't have any fugitive emissions and helping our customers use less of our product. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly now to talk a little bit about our Destination Zero and what we see the gas utility of the future looking like.
Yep. Thanks, Dinah. So Destination Zero is really our pathway to carbon neutrality. So it's our Vision 2050 goal of reaching carbon neutrality. And in that goal, we really see it as a combination of using all the tools in the toolbox. So using traditional things like deep energy efficiency to really lower that usage, but then also looking to newer technologies and, like we'll cover, they're already in existent technologies, but renewable natural gas and hydrogen to really change what's flowing through our pipeline system. So reducing the usage, decarbonizing what's flowing through, and looking at other options like carbon capture. Everything's on the table, and we're really researching and looking into everything. We're not putting all our eggs in one basket, and we're really seeing this as a solution to balancing the energy system. So you can see up in the top, power to gas. Crystal will cover that a little bit later, but really working with the electricity system and all these transportation mechanisms to decarbonize the economy is really how we see the future.
Ready for me next?
Yep.
Okay.
And to show our commitment to decarbonization, I think Nina already mentioned she sent over our Vision 2050 plan that was released in November of last year. So that was really a data-driven modeling of different decarbonization pathways that we can take. We hear a lot of people question a specific pathway or specific technology, so we really wanted to take it upon ourselves to really vet out different options and showing if regulatory changes impact one or market impacts another, we've got solutions to make up those differences. So that's really the focus of that report, and it is really feeding into our IRP process that's currently going on. So that's our integrated resource plan. And that's a plan that's published and vetted all through the PUC. It's a very public process. And it really determines where all our resources are going to come from to supply our customers. And so that is guided by our Vision 2050, and it's also guided by regulations on the books. So under that and more, we've got DEQ's own program to reduce emissions, 50% by 2035 and 90 by 2050. That's all integrated, and it's the backbone of our IRP planning process. And then we have a lot of other tools and options we've been rolling out. SB 98 allows us to buy renewable natural gas on behalf of customers. SB 844 is another mechanism for getting more renewables in the system. Green tariffs we're working on. We've just started one in Washington, and we're hoping to do the same in Oregon. But looking to all these other things, our carbon capture pilot is kicking off shortly with Clean O2 with some of our customers to really test out that technology. And like Nina mentioned, our One Future Consortium, we really focus on buying, when we talk about even our conventional gas, we prioritize producers that produce less emissions. So we use EPA's data to really prioritize those producers. So we find emission savings all throughout our operations from end use to production. It's really our commitment to decarbonizing.
And I did want to kind of add one thing. I know, Mayor Gamba, sometimes I get frustrated at the pace that we operate with. We share that frustration, but I'm not sure how much you guys know about how we are able to operate. We are a monopoly. That means we're regulated. So when we want to do something different or unusual, we have to go to the PUC. The PUC often will say, you need to go get legislation passed that allows you to go do that. So that then makes us go through a legislative session. We get that accomplished, hopefully, and then we go back to the PUC, there's rulemaking. So we really, we probably will have an ask of you. We want to partner with you, but we're going to need your support to help us with our regulators get things moving quicker and having more flexibility to do some of these things, even if they're pilots, which we'll talk about in the future. But that's a really important thing. We'd love to move nimbly like a reindeer. Sadly, because of the regulatory structure we're under, sometimes we're a little bit more like a battleship, but we are on track and we're tough to derail once we get started.
Can you clarify what renewable gas is?
Oh, that is our next slide.
Way to set that up.
Perfect. So renewable natural gas is really methane captured from waste sources. So you've got wastewater treatment plants, landfills, food processing, dairies. They all generate this waste, so when it's broken down, it produces methane. So really, renewable natural gas is not generating new CO2 or new methane. It's capturing what's out there and it would either be released to the atmosphere. In some cases, it's flared, so it's burned.
No purpose, mind
For
you.
no purpose other than to downgrade it from methane. And so what renewable natural gas is, it's really capturing that waste gas that would go straight in the atmosphere, and it's putting it towards beneficial use and downgrading it from a methane to a CO2 with the combustion. So it's got climate benefits, and it's, like I said, it's not generating new gas. It's using an existing gas that would exist anywhere there's waste. So anywhere there's humans, any agricultural breakdown, it all generates methane in the anaerobic process. So its life cycle emissions are similar to, wind and solar. There's nothing new generated. We're not pumping anything out. And it's not new. So there's 487 facilities operating under development in North America. We're proud to be, I think, the first natural gas utility to own our own. We have bought into our own RNG production facility. We are very committed to this fuel type, and we see it as a good solution. So much so that we've even created a non-regulated, when Dinah's talking about the ability for the gas utility to move fast. We do have a lot of regulatory barriers, but we as a company see this as such an important fuel source that we have a non-regulated company that's broken off to do more development of it. But we currently are connecting 3 RNG projects in Oregon in our pipeline system, and under that SB 98, that's really what allowed us to start procuring renewable natural gas for customers last year. When we talk about regulation, the PUC has a lot of requirements on what types of gas we can buy, cost, risk. And prior to that, we really didn't have that regulatory tool to enable us to go procure it. So,
And why is that? Least cost?
Least cost, least risk. So there is a cost premium on renewable natural gas. And so we were able to work with legislation and legislators and pass the Senate Bill 98, and it has those volumetric targets up there. And we're on track and planning to meet those. We already announced agreements totaling 3%, the ability to develop up to 3% of our load, which is pretty impressive in just a year. We're proud of that factor.
It's hard to see the dates.
So it's 2025 is 10%, 2030 is 15, 2035 is 20, and 2040 is 25, 2045 is 30. And we see those more as minimums, and hoping to exceed those. But that's what, under the Senate bill, we're allowed to go out and procure under certain cost restrictions. But, yep.
So questions on this so far, do you want to just wait till the end? We don't want to, we're bringing a lot at you here because there's a lot to discuss, but if you have questions, you feel free to jump out.
If not, got a question at this point.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. What's your calculation on how much renewable natural gas is currently being produced in the region and would be, these are basically, they're fugitive emissions that you could capture?
So one thing that I think is important to note is you said in the region, the renewable natural gas, there isn't that geographic limitation because it's really displacing. When you think of greenhouse gas, it's a global pollutant. So anything that we're procuring in any state on behalf of our customers is displacing conventional natural gas in the pipeline system. So we don't have those limitations really. We can buy in Nebraska, we can buy in Florida, but overall it's reducing the carbon intensity of the pipeline system. So that is one great thing about it. As far as amounts, I know there's been lots of studies that we can send over about the total volume. One benefit is we're early movers on this, and producers really like the fact that we can sign longer term contracts than some of the transportation markets. So that is a selling point for utilities to be purchasing it.
And then one thing that we have, one current local, the Multnomah Care, the wastewater treatment plant on Columbia Boulevard. Additionally, I can't say where the other one is, but we're very close to announcing another exciting interconnect right here in our region. So that's neat. The other thing that's important about this is our pipeline system allows other people to put gas on there. We may not be buying it, but for our pipeline system, they would have to truck that RNG somewhere else. So our system, while it's not necessarily benefiting our customers in their decarbonization, because it exists, it allows other projects to be pencil out and that environmental good happening.
And one other key point with renewable natural gas is it's molecularly the same as natural gas, though it's interchangeable in the pipeline system. So it burns exactly the same. It acts exactly the same from any sort of safety, appliance, or operations, all of that. It's completely interchangeable. So we can go up to 100% in our pipeline system. It's just a matter of procuring enough and getting approval to it.
And so you said you're at 3% now, and so what does like a Columbia Boulevard sewage treatment plant, how much is that of your?
And that's the sort of thing that thankfully you have a record and you'll be getting a lovely email. That's why I really want to take all those kinds of questions and have our experts or our engineering staff answer those accurately, because I could pull a number out of my ear that I'm thinking, but I don't want to give you inaccurate information.
Okay.
And that's up to developing up to 3%. So that's what's on contract to be built. Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing that I like to talk about is our system as a battery and the fact what it actually holds.
I'm sorry, I still had questions.
Oh, sure.
Back
Yeah, please.
on the last slide there.
Go for it.
So you guys are very good at talking about the how secure and basically limited emissions are coming from your pipes and your system. When we're talking about renewable natural gas and bringing it to market, how does your system, being a good, tight, closed system, interact with renewable natural gas, with fugitive emissions from elsewhere coming into the system? How do those get there? Because I hear you saying, well, if any molecule of fugitive emissions we can capture and use as, to heat someone's house is better than not having it go out into the atmosphere. But I feel like there's a lot that's being glossed over in there in terms of what does it mean to get that into the system.
Well, regarding that one future that I discussed earlier, there's 50 different organizations along the entire value chain from extraction to burner tip. That comprises about 20% of the people who are involved in local gas distribution and procurement, extraction, all of that. I think over time, you're going to see these processes, these best practices really having a market-based incentive. So we feel that more people will be coming on there. I can also, I want to get the exact language right, but I believe when we purchase this renewable natural gas, there are very high standards. They have to kind of meet our standards as we purchase it. So we're not just going and buying some jalopy type kind of car, or that's not the sort of place that we want to incentivize. We want to make sure that the people that we are doing business with are as serious about this as we are. Because if this doesn't go well, it basically gives a black eye to the whole system. Is it going to probably be perfect all the time everywhere? No, we're evolving. But if you see, I'm very proud to be able to say that 3% number to you today. When you look at wind and solar, and I want to say they're at like 13% nationwide, and that's taken decades. We're not fooling around with this. You ready to go? Next.
Any other questions on?
Okay, so regarding the storage, the idea is it's important for you to think about what the displacement of the gas system is. You think about with the most efficient equipment, if you were to take all the natural gas in our service territory away, you'd have to at minimum double your hydro. With average efficiency, you might have to triple it. So the thing that we'd like you to consider is how much we have invested in that system, the basic leaps that you're seeing in technology and in infrastructure, and that existing facility can be used to store not just renewable natural gas intermixed with the conventional methane, but also methanated hydrogen or other hydrogen products. And Northwest Natural's current storage can hold about 6 million basically megawatts of energy. And if you were to replicate that with battery technology, that's about $2 trillion at today's prices. So this is a pretty serious asset that is very modern, and you have the opportunity right now to leverage it or not. So I'm going to move on a little bit. And
Can I ask?
Sure.
And this is just my own ignorance, but what is it stored in? Tanks?
No, in
Underground storage
Underground.
system and in the pipes themselves. So
Okay.
the pipes serve as a storage system,
Yeah.
but we have an underground storage system over in Mist too that stores.
And that's a whole another exciting thing that we can talk about, but it's probably not a thing that we want to delve into tonight because it's a whole bunch of other exciting, neat things, why our system's pretty unique.
Okay.
Okay, you're on.
So let's talk about hydrogen today. And we call that power to gas or renewable hydrogen or green hydrogen. You might hear some colors around hydrogen, blue hydrogen, turquoise hydrogen. It's all low carbon hydrogen that we're focused on. We're not focusing on high carbon hydrogen to blend into our natural gas system. So power to gas is a process where we take electricity, pass it through water, split up that molecule and create hydrogen and oxygen. We can take that hydrogen, we can put it into our gas system and store it there for weeks, months, even years, and forward, when we need it. And so the nice thing that we can do is we can combine or couple the electric and gas systems more deeply so that when we have excess wind and solar power from renewables, we can create hydrogen and put it into our pipe and use it at a later date. And as the electric grid becomes greener and greener and greener, we're going to have more wind and more solar because we have to overbuild those to make up for the times when we don't have wind and solar and wind resources available. But when we do have high wind and high solar days, we have an abundance of electricity. And so if that has no place to go, we generally just curtail it. We turn off the windmills and we stop them. So instead of just stopping those assets, we can continue to run them and make hydrogen and put that into our natural gas system and store it for a later date. That's basically what we can do. And we can use the existing gas system that we have bought and paid for already to enable this. So if you look at the cost of capital for that storage and compare it to, let's say, pumped hydro or batteries, it is a fraction of the cost in capital to do the same amount of kilowatt hour storage.
And is this woo-woo stuff, Chris? Has this never been done before? Is this magic?
No, I think we all did the electrolysis project in 5th grade, but if you look at Europe, they're doing much more of these projects. We're just getting started here in North America. There's over 100 projects going on there. In Asia and in Chile, this is all going on right now.
And in fact, Hawaii, they have hydrogen that they use for some of their energy needs there. So this is not a new technology. It's just having the system to leverage it. And we're going down now. There we go.
Yeah, so hydrogen's coming. It's going to be displacing fossil gas in our system. We believe we can use upwards of 20% blend in our system today. Without any changes in our infrastructure or downstream appliances, and we're preparing for that. So we've already procured different blends of hydrogen, actually a 5% blend, and we've been injecting that into our Sherwood facility and making sure that all of our safety procedures and our equipment works with it, and checking out different appliances, making sure they work. We did that work a few years ago, and now we're on the next step. We're learning more about blending into buildings. So we were about to turn the gas on in Sherwood for upwards of 20% blend for about a year. And we're going to see how the equipment there operates. And we're going to make sure that all of our standard operating procedures and our equipment works just fine with that. And then after that learning, we have a project in Eugene we're working on, which is a 1 megawatt electrolyzer to blend upwards of 10% gas into about 2,300 different customers' homes, and then businesses and industrial uses there as well. So we're just continuing to learn and blend in hydrogen as we go.
And I guess the reason we put this slide in is, I know, again, we've been talking a lot. I want you to see the things that we are doing now so we can make this possible everywhere across our system. And the key thing that, Chris, we are, for some reasons, going slowly because we want to ensure not only can we do this, but we can do this safely and make sure that our system is up to it and that it doesn't impact any of our customers' equipment. So
we're not the only ones doing it. There's lots of different projects throughout the U.S. and Canada for blending. Enbridge started a couple years ago at 2%. Centerpoint just turned their hydrogen electrolyzer on the other day. They've got a 5% blend going. But I'd like to draw your attention to the United Kingdom. They've been doing this for many years now, and I had the opportunity to go see their Winlayton facility a few weeks back and actually tour their hydrogen home, where they have a 100% hydrogen home that runs on 100% hydrogen appliances, which is fascinating to see where we're headed to as a gas utility. And the H21 project there, they're working on system-wide 100% hydrogen network for the entire UK. So pretty big changes going on there.
So,
Can I ask a quick question? It just, we're hearing a lot in the news about how gas production is a problem in Europe these days due to the Ukrainian war and Russia withholding gas, et cetera, So how is, since Europe is farther ahead on this, hydrogen figuring into those conversations and sort of their struggle to figure out how to get off of gas coming from Russia?
Sure. So transitioning to hydrogen allows them to get green hydrogen into their system and into their heating network. So because of all the shift to renewables, they have this excess power that they're looking at coming in the future. And again, when you have a lot of solar and wind, you have to overbuild it. So they're looking at a ton of curtailed energy coming up. And so that transition enables them to create that green hydrogen and put that into their network. So it actually helps that they're transitioning to hydrogen because they have multiple sources that they can leverage.
Why can't they do it faster?
These are huge projects that take, years, billions and billions of dollars of capital.
well, and there again, that's where we look to you guys as partners, because a lot of the things that slow us down are important things, environmental impact studies, permitting, all of those things. We're building infrastructure. Infrastructure requires a lot of study and permits. That's why it takes time. So anything that we can do to expedite, I'm not saying take shortcuts, but really expedite energy projects that are greening either the electric system or the gas system, because really, in our opinion, you really have to work them both together using the greenest molecule and the greenest electron at the right time. So there again, this is just basically to show you that we are not just talking, we're spending time, money, energy, and we're actually getting some things done here. And hopefully this fall, we would be able to maybe do a bus tour to show you an interconnect, show you our training town where we're blending, be able to really show you what this actually looks like, so you see that we really are serious and this isn't just smoke and mirrors, that we're spending time, money, energy, capital on these things, and we expect to bring this system-wide.
So that brings up a question that I have. Very often in these venues, you talk about how green you are, how hard you're working towards 100% renewable future, all of those things. And then the state passes a bill that basically requires that you do that, and you sue them to stop that regulation. Why?
Well, I mean, I can tell you exactly a reason why. For instance, a lot of people did not realize that we were actually in favor of the last two sessions of cap and trade that was not able to be passed. We supported that. We support good policy that promotes decarbonization. We feel that there might be some problems with the way it's currently been written. I'm happy to send you our company statement about that, but we believe in good policy. We're committed to decarbonization, and we're complying with the law.
And challenging that rule does not take away from our carbon neutral goals, that we're still pushing ahead, and that's even more aggressive than that rule was. So to keep that in mind, we just, there are some concerns with the way the details of that rule were.
And to be frank, we're serious about this. We need to get it right the first time. We don't have time to waste. And, we talked a little bit earlier about what houses used to use and what they are planning to use. This is even including growth. You see that we are going to be delivering less amounts of energy to even an increasing amount of homes. And that's going to be done through the energy efficiency, better technology, all of those things. And Mayor Gamba, you asked about a pathway or a plan to see how we're going to meet our decarbonization goals. It's right there with those percentages. Right now, it's pretty much conventional natural gas. You're going to see the renewable natural gas ramp up quicker. Then you're going to see offsets in increasing amount for a short period of time. As we are able to ramp up more RNG and more renewable hydrogen, you're going to see those offsets be that last little slice of the pie that is very difficult or very expensive to decarbonize. So summarizing our view, we embrace the change. We're here to partner with you. We don't want to fight. We want to understand your goals, your questions, the challenges the city of Milwaukie faces, and we want to work with you to help achieve those goals. And really, there is no such thing as a ban on natural gas. You hear places talk about bans on natural gas in our state. People will be using natural gas for power generation for a long time. We would like them to use it efficiently, effectively, leveraging the system our customers have already paid for. And reliability, that's not something we didn't even touch on. Reliability is key. Two energy systems are just fundamentally more reliable for things like ice storms, other power outages, windstorms. Our system can be there with operating certain equipment and be being used for backup generation in places like hospitals, schools, community centers, things like that. And lastly, we put up some stats for you on what residents think about natural gas. They really oppose gas bans, but they feel that we all need to work together to bring more renewables on the system and preserve energy choice and really focus on affordability and the environment together. So that's pretty much it. I mean, that's a lot. And I'm sorry we dumped so much on you here. I, again, hope that this is just one of a bunch of discussions we have going forward.
I wanted to get back to something from the very beginning. I was not wanting to interrupt because I knew you had a lot to say.
Want me to scroll back up?
No, it's okay. But when you were talking about the leakage, a couple of things. One, how can you measure the leakage that's occurring in someone's home at, you know, an old stove that's leaking or a gas fireplace or a furnace or something? How can you measure that?
Yeah, we got a real good answer for that. We have a free equipment check that's free for every one of our customers every year. We have a technician come out there, they have leakage detectors, they measure and check all sorts of things, and they will identify a list of problems for you, and that's a free of charge service that we offer to every single one of our customers, and we encourage them to go do that. Additionally, if there is an issue that is found, we address it with the homeowner. We provide a list of contractors that are vetted and meet our high standards, and we offer that to them too as well.
Sure, and that's great that you do that. That still doesn't answer the question of you come up with a calculation that you have a 0.4% leakage. How do you know it's leaking in homes? Unless someone has called you to say, hey, we might have a leak, can you come check? How do you know what the percentage of leakage is in the homes?
And that, you know, that I'm sure, because we have to report the stuff to EPA, I'm sure that there's an answer to that. Do I have at this moment? No, because that's not my field of expertise, but I will work with our internal team and get you an answer to that.
Yep, it all uses vetted EPA required calculation methodology. So it's every utility in the country has to report, and it all follows EPA required.
Right, and that was the reporting method that arrived at that the nationwide, I'm not speaking to your system specifically, but nationwide, there was roughly a 3% leakage across the board, which then 16 different studies by universities who don't have a dog in the fight determined that it was much closer to the 10% that I quoted. So the EPA system clearly doesn't work.
So to speak to that, we're involved in a lot of groups that are currently working on better monitoring and modeling technology for this. So this is an ever-evolving field, and they are trying to standardize more measurement-based quantification. So it's an ever-evolving field, and we are actively involved in those conversations.
And please know, it's in our interest as well to make sure, not just for the health and safety of our customers, which is absolutely paramount, but we're going to report to you the amount of therms that are used in your city every year. And those fugitive emissions are going to come out in our reporting to you. We want to drive those numbers down as far as possible, if nothing more than our reporting to you, because that's what we're going to have to decarbonize. We do not want fugitive emissions. That is not helpful on any stretch of the imagination, with safety being the paramount thing. And that's why we do a lot of education about the smell. Go, let us know. We have that stinky mercaptan in our product, so if people smell that, we really want to educate them. Get the heck out and give us a call, because there's probably a problem if you're smelling that, and we don't want that problem.
So it sounds like one of the things that would be really helpful would be to make that, instead of an opt-in program, would be to have it be an opt-out program. And when I'm saying that, I mean, rather than having a customer have the responsibility to call Northwest Natural on an annual basis to have an inspection of equipment that is using gas in their homes, it would be something that was automatically provided, and they would have to say, no, I really don't want you to come into my house and look at this stuff.
And I hear what you're saying, that I'm not saying that that's been thought of or not thought of before. I simply don't have an answer to that, but we definitely can run that to ground if that's ever been talked about. And if it's not possible, why isn't it possible? But I hear what you're saying, because you're right. We all get busy and we're living our lives, and we forget to do things like wash the dog, much less get our furnaces checked out.
Right. Would you like to see the filters in my furnace?
No, but we know what you're getting for Christmas.
And sort of a follow-on to that would be, I am someone who uses things until they're used up. And that includes my appliances. And that will include any sort of stove that I have, regardless of the fuel it uses. So one of the other places where we could, it seems, do a lot to further your goals as decarbonization is becoming at the forefront, and as you're trying to make sure that people are reducing their usage, would be to get our older appliances on some sort of schedule. When somebody sells a house, for example, you're required, if you have, a furnace that's more than 10 years old, is X level of efficiency, whatever, some sort of criteria that would require it to be replaced with something else before the house is purchased by a new owner.
And I appreciate what you're saying there. My concern, especially in this market, is housing affordability. I mean, yes, I would like everyone to have everything brand new and totally efficient. Most important to me is making sure people have homes to be able to have their families sheltered under. But I hear what you're saying, and that might be something to work towards as we go through. And that's why we work with incentives and our trade allies to make sure that they're really talking to people about the best, most efficient technologies, and bringing other things like gas heat pumps and gas heat pump hot water heaters to market in a more affordable scale, so people have those options as well.
It's just that when you're also going to the PUC and requesting a fairly significant, substantial rate increase and promoting the use of renewable natural gas that we know will cost billions of dollars, or hydrogen, billions of dollars, to really get this stuff integrated, that will also have substantial impacts on our rates and on ratepayers, and subsequently on low-income customers. So I guess what I'm getting at is that we have a public health benefit to be had from meeting people where they're at in their homes that's being completely ignored in this conversation, while you're also talking about very significantly expensive infrastructure that will also cost your low-income ratepayers.
So one thing I think is important to note is they passed a differentiated rates bill last year. We were supportive of that. And so that does address some of those concerns with lower income customers. But also that SB 98 does have spending limits in it. It's not a free-for-all, buy whatever expensive fuel you want. There are strict requirements on how much it can impact rates. So there are still plenty of cost controls, but Energy Trust is really a good resource for those incentives for equipment upgrades.
And, I would say two things to that. One of the things, we have just reallocated some staff to really focus on the commercial space. We have had major account services folks that deal with our large industrial customers really work on their efficiency. We have building and HVAC folks that interface with those sectors to really help drive efficiency. The big place that has been missing has been the one-on-one small industrial commercial space, and we're really focusing on that because we know there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there. But I do just want to say one thing. This decarbonizing of the energy sector, whatever fuel you use, be fuel agnostic, it's going to cost money. It's going to be a bit expensive for a while. The key thing is, much like wind and solar, we know if we do it pragmatically with good policy and good support, that we can create a market for this, for these products, and we can drive costs down over time. And that would be our goal, is to do this as fast, affordably, and reliably as we can.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you for the extra time. We waxed poetic, but we will come back and maybe spend less time, maybe.
Appreciate it.
Thank
All right,
you. Thank you.
Brian, can you invite him in?
Yes, hello, can you hear me okay?
Can, thanks.
Okay, great. Let me just share my screen so you can see the,
He's setting you up to do that. Hang on
It
a
says
second.
screen sharing is disabled. Are you able to enable that so I can show slides?
And don't rush, since Northwest Natural had 45 minutes. Take the time you need to communicate what you need to communicate.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. It says that screen sharing is disabled. Are you able to activate that so I can display my slides?
Yeah, you should be able to screen share now.
Great, there we go. All right, are you seeing that okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mayor Gamba and members of the council for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Brian Emanuels. I'm with Climate Solutions. We are a 501c3 nonprofit operating in Washington and Oregon. I think it's fair to say that we're the leading climate policy and advocacy organization in the Pacific Northwest. We have policy experts in both states in the areas of building decarbonization, transportation electrification, cleaning our electricity grid, and also working to enact and implement broader climate policies like the cap and trade laws that both states are in the process of rolling out. My area of focus is working with local governments, primarily in Washington state, advising them on best practices for their climate action plans and local policies on carbon reduction, particularly in the areas of building decarbonization. There we go. I think, as we've all experienced over the last few years, the climate crisis is not some distant, far off future that our kids and grandkids have to worry about. It's something we're all dealing with today, from the crazy heat wave we all experienced crazy and sadly deadly heat wave that we all experienced last summer, to the wildfires that have sadly become essentially an annual event, to the severe drought that is impacting virtually the entire Western United States. It's here now. I think this quote from the Oregon Health Authority put it well, that climate impacts are already worsening public health crises, increasing economic disruption, and exacerbating racial inequity in Oregon. And so what I want to talk to you tonight is what impact buildings have on the climate crisis, and what we can do to reduce the climate impact of the built environment. Buildings, nationwide, buildings use about 1/3 of the so-called natural gas in the country, but the rest split between industry and power plants for electricity generation. And it's growing. We're hooking up about one new home to the natural gas network every minute, or more than 500,000 new gas hookups every year nationwide. And that's particularly significant because gas is methane, which is the primary ingredient in so-called natural gas, is about 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere over a 20-year time frame. Fossil natural gas is far from being the safe, clean product that gas utilities and fossil fuel companies claim. And when it burns, it produces CO2, and that CO2, stays in the atmosphere for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So while the CO2 emitted from methane is less than coal, about half as much as burning coal, if even a tiny fraction of that methane leaks in its raw form, it easily negates the benefits that gas purports to have over coal. So it's really a very dirty fossil fuel. Homes and buildings in Oregon consume nearly 43% of all energy in the state and are neck and neck with transportation and causing about a third of the state's overall climate pollution. And unlike most of these other sectors where emissions are relatively flat or if not declining, in the case of buildings, the emissions are actually growing up about 50% since 1990. And that runs directly headlong into the...
Can you go back to that slide? I couldn't tell which line is buildings?
I'm sorry, buildings is the orange line.
Okay. Residential commercial, okay.
Yeah, so it's just about caught up with transportation as being the largest source of climate emissions. Right? So that runs, headlong into the aggressive goals that Oregon has set for reducing our carbon emissions, which are to reduce them 45% below 1990 levels by 2035, and at least 80% from 1990 levels by 2050. And of course, the IPCC calls for even greater reductions than that, of achieving a 95% reduction or net zero by 2050. We are making some headway, though. A number of policies have been implemented in recent years to set us on a path toward reaching those goals. In particular, the Climate Protection Program requires oil and gas companies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2035 and 90% by 2050. And it establishes targets for industrial facilities to cut greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2035. It achieves that by creating a cap and trade marketplace where utilities will have to acquire allowances to emit greenhouse gases, and those allowances will decline over time, which will mean they'll get increasingly scarce and thus increasingly expensive. The money raised from selling those allowances will produce millions of dollars that will fund clean energy projects around the state. In addition, last year, Oregon passed the 100% Clean Electricity for All bill, which will transition the relatively clean grid that Oregon already has to a fully 100% clean, emissions-free grid by 2040. It's one of the most aggressive laws or ambitious laws in the country. And it bans the construction of any new fossil fuel-powered power plants. Oregon also has a pretty robust set of policies around transportation, including a clean fuel standard, which now Washington and California have, and British Columbia. So we have it up and down the West Coast or Green Coast, along with a zero emission vehicle standard and an advanced trucks rule. What's missing is a commensurate set of policies to decarbonize our buildings. Our built environment, and what we think we need is policies that will drive us toward all electric construction. And what that would look like is transitioning from gas-powered furnaces, or worst case, oil furnaces, to electric heat pumps. Electric heat pumps essentially are an air conditioning unit that can run in both directions. Rather than using energy to produce heat directly, it uses this input energy to transfer energy from ambient air into or out of a home. So they actually ended up being more than 100% efficient. In fact, modern units are up to 300% efficient, and some even 400 or 500% efficient. So they literally produce more heat energy than they use up in electricity. And they have the added advantage, because they can operate bidirectionally, they can pump heat into a home during the winter or out of a home in the summer. So you essentially get air conditioning for free. Heat pumps also work for water heating. Heat pump water heaters can be replacements for gas or electric water heaters. And induction cooktops can also replace gas-powered stoves. And the cumulative impact of this is pretty significant. About 70% of the gas use in our homes goes toward heating the space within homes. Water heating represents about another quarter. So between them, that's the vast majority of gas use within our homes. Cooking is a relatively small slice, although it's most of the rest, but it has a disproportionate impact on air quality and associated health impacts. So I want to take a couple of minutes to address that. Gas cooking appliances emit a range of dangerous pollutants, including carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, small particulate matter, formaldehyde. A recent study also showed traces of benzene from burning fossil fuels. And they've even been shown to leak methane even when they're turned off. A study by UCLA found that after just 1 hour of cooking with a gas stove, 90% of homes would have such poor indoor air quality that they would not meet federal air quality standards for outdoor air. And children living in a home with a gas stove are 42% more likely to experience asthma symptoms. That led the American Medical Association last month to adopt a resolution to inform physicians, healthcare providers, and the public that cooking with a gas stove increases household air pollution and the risk of childhood asthma. This shows just an example of or a sample of some of the carcinogens that are released when you burn natural gas, and some of the associated health impacts, including cardiovascular disease, respiratory illness, cognitive function, high blood pressure, and others.
Can I ask, and you may not know the answer to this, I don't know, but we were just told that someone could have the Northwest Natural come in and test all their appliances. Are they testing for all of these things?
That would be a better question for them. I think what they said is they're testing for leakage of gas within a home. I'm not sure if they're testing for the presence of carcinogens that would be produced when you're actually burning natural gas. But again, they'd have to confirm what that testing would actually test for.
It is generally hard to test for that kind of stuff using hand meters. It's fairly sophisticated equipment.
I'm sorry, I had a little trouble hearing that.
Oh, I was just saying that it's, in my understanding, it's generally fairly challenging to test for those sorts of pollutants with handheld meters. It's more sophisticated equipment to get accurate readings.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. It's also important to recognize that these health impacts are not distributed equally. Because of historical redlining and segregation, BIPOC communities, particularly Black communities, have been forced to live in areas that have significantly worse air pollution. As a result, Black, Latino, Asian people, as well as people in lower socioeconomic areas, have higher risk of premature death and particle pollution. If you look at a historical redlining map and compare it to a current map of air quality, there's almost a perfect overlap. Areas that were redlined in the past, have almost uniformly worse air quality, and that affects the health and life expectancy of residents in those areas today. Beyond just the direct air quality impacts, there's also safety impacts from using a toxic explosive gas in our homes. On average, over the past 3 years, a gas pipeline incident has killed someone, sent someone to the hospital, and/or caused a fire or explosion once every 4 days nationwide. In fact, just last week, right across the river in Vancouver, a large gas leak caused dangerously high levels of gas, requiring nearly 100 people to evacuate their homes. We here in the Pacific Northwest live in a highly earthquake-prone region, and gas is responsible for at least 20% of post-earthquake fire ignitions. And it's also a liability for recovery because gas line takes much longer, up to 30 times longer to restore than the electric system after natural disasters. Another important safety consideration, particularly for elderly and vulnerable communities, is access to air conditioning. As we saw tragically last summer, where over 100 Oregonians lost their lives in the record heat wave, along with hundreds more across the region, air conditioning is increasingly essential. I mean, it really is a life safety necessity, or is becoming a life safety necessity. but the Pacific Northwest has one of the lowest rates of air conditioning penetration of anywhere in the country. So we believe it's important to public health and safety to change that by ensuring that all new buildings have it. Fortunately, as I mentioned, electric heat pumps provide an affordable solution to that. Moving to electric homes also saves money. A study came out just last week showing that switching all new electric space and water heating to heat pumps by 2030 would cut carbon emissions in half by 2035 and save at least 1.1 billion by 2050. And there's a study specific to Oregon. If we were able to start in 2025 so that all new appliances were electric, the carbon emissions cut would be even higher, and the savings would reach 1.7 billion. RMI did a study about 2 years ago where they analyzed the cost of all electric homes in a number of cities, closest one being Eugene. What they found is that an all electric home in Eugene saves $1,600 in upfront construction costs. And so even though electric heat pumps are a little bit more expensive than comparable gas appliances today, although that gap is narrowing, particularly as we scale up, those costs are more than offset by savings from eliminating the need for gas infrastructure, both piping the gas to a building and within the building. Plus, there's savings over time in reduced energy costs. What they calculated is that an all-electric home has a net present value of $3,500 less over a 15-year period due to the utility bill savings. It's important to note that, like I said, this study was done 2 years ago. Since then, gas prices have spiked even before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has caused them to go up even further, as we've all seen. And also, it doesn't take into account the impacts of the Climate Protection Plan, which is likely to have long-term upward pressure on gas utility rates as utilities scramble to acquire those increasingly scarce pollution allowances. So the time to act is now. I mean, the first rule of getting out of a hole is stop digging. If we don't start making this transition now, we're simply compounding the problem and making it more difficult to achieve our climate goals later. Especially in the case of buildings where a newly constructed building, be it a home or a commercial building, may last for 50 years, 75, even 100 years. New gas pipelines now are going to become stranded assets in the future. And we all know who's going to get caught holding the bag. It's most likely going to be low-income residents and those in vulnerable and BIPOC communities who are going to be stuck, paying higher utility costs and looking at expensive retrofits down the line. But as you've heard, the gas industry is fighting for their lives. I mean, they understandably view building decarbonization as an existential threat to their business, particularly in Oregon, where all three gas utilities rely exclusively on gas and don't have an electricity business to fall back on. So they're pulling out all the stops to fight back and keep their gas business going as long as possible. Gas utilities are spending funding expensive advertising campaigns, including hiring internet influencers to promote cooking with gas, and even distributing coloring books to kids, urging them to color their way through natural gas town. I think even Joe Camel would blush at that. But while the industry has backed off somewhat from their outright climate denialism, it was great to hear Northwest Natural speaking of their goals to try to decarbonize. What they've generally switched to is what we like to call climate delayism, actively trying to slow down any effort to require them to move away from gas infrastructure by claiming they can decarbonize on their own. And the fact that, as Mayor Gamber brought up, the fact that the three utilities are suing the state of Oregon to block the Climate Protection Program maybe says they want to hedge their bets on whether they're actually going to be able to reach those decarbonization goals. And in fact, the Oregon Public Utility Commission Natural Gas Fact-Finding Investigation, sometimes called the Future of Gas docket, makes clear that the gas companies simply don't have a viable plan to decarbonize, as it depends primarily on continuing to expand the gas network, but gradually transitioning to alternate forms of gas, specifically, as you heard, renewable natural gas, or RNG. And that, as they said, RNG is just methane, but sourced from alternative places like agricultural waste or captured from landfills and water treatment facilities. And it is very important that we capture as much of this gas as possible. Otherwise, it'll just be released into the atmosphere as super potent greenhouse gas in the form of methane. But don't be misled by the renewable label into thinking that RNG is somehow clean. As they said, it's chemically indistinguishable from fracked methane gas with all the associated adverse health and climate impacts. It's only renewable based on the assumption that we're going to continue dumping organic material into landfills and the cows are going to keep pooping. But the fact is, there just is not enough RNG to decarbonize Oregon's buildings. According to an Oregon DOE report, and even the most optimistic gas industry-funded studies suggest that RNG could at most replace 16% of domestic fossil gas consumption. And to the extent that RNG is available, we believe that that it will best be used in hard to decarbonize sectors like industrial heat and long haul shipping, rather than for heating our buildings, because they have, as we've discussed, better, cheaper, cleaner alternatives available. They also tout green hydrogen as a solution for greening the gas network, and no doubt that green hydrogen has a lot of great potential, but it also has a number of problems. First, 98% of today's hydrogen supply, which is mainly used to produce ammonia for fertilizer, is produced from fossil fuels, and it's extremely dirty. Green hydrogen, which is produced by electrolyzers powered by renewable electricity, currently comprises a tiny fraction, less than 1% of today's hydrogen market, and it's currently several times more expensive. I think about 6 times more expensive than dirtier forms of hydrogen. So the first step is in the transition to green hydrogen is to replace the existing dirty production, but even that will require at least a 100-fold increase in the green hydrogen supply and a substantial reduction in production costs. But there's a lot of effort going toward that, and so we will very likely get there. The question is when. But even once we're able to scale up green hydrogen production beyond just replacing the existing supply, then the question becomes, what will be the highest and best use for it? Most analyses project that the most viable markets for hydrogen will be to replace fossil fuels for the production of industrial heat, particularly in steel and cement production, and for long-haul shipping, including possibly aviation, and for long-duration energy storage. It's very unlikely to be a viable large-scale option for either light-duty vehicles or for heating our buildings, where in both cases, electrification is already a viable, cheaper, and better option. Regarding buildings in particular, existing gas appliances and infrastructure are only designed to accommodate a mix of up to 20% hydrogen. And because hydrogen is less dense by volume than methane, this would represent only a 7% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So to go beyond that would require replacing every gas appliance connected to a particular pipeline. And likely the pipeline itself, as hydrogen is corrosive to existing pipes and much more subject to leakage. Sounds like Northwest Natural has already replaced a lot of their pipes, so they may be in better shape. But in reality, hydrogen is likely to be, if it's used in buildings at all, it's really likely to be used only for new developments where the entire development is built from the get-go for hydrogen. So, our feeling is that, bottom line, buildings are literally the last place that we're going to want to use green hydrogen, at least until the supply is so abundant that we get that far down the food chain. In the case of buildings, electrification is just a vastly superior option. It's available today and cost-effective today. So how do we get there? How do we move toward solutions? The good news is we're making some pretty good progress, particularly here in the Pacific Northwest. And on the West Coast. There's over 80 local jurisdictions spanning 11 states that have passed ordinances relating to building decarbonization. Probably most famously, Berkeley was the first city in the country to ban natural gas in all new construction. Multnomah County and Portland, and now about 50 other cities in California have followed suit. Multnomah County and Portland Public Schools have both adopted policies requiring new buildings to be all electric. And the city of Eugene has passed 2 motions last fall directing staff to explore legal pathways to require that all new construction be 100% electric by next January, and to create a roadmap for comprehensive and electrification of existing buildings by 2045. They're holding further public hearings, including one last night, and have 2 work sessions later this month to further develop those options. So we're hopeful that they will be the next city to move forward with all-electric buildings policy. Up in Washington, the cities of Seattle, Shoreline, and Bellingham all adopted new commercial energy codes requiring electric heat pumps for all new construction, and other cities like Tacoma and Olympia have passed resolutions directing a move toward electric buildings, beginning with municipal facilities, but also looking for pathways to decarbonize all existing new and existing buildings. But the big news was that in Washington State, the State Building Code Council recently, actually on Earth Day this past April, adopted a new commercial energy code to require that all new commercial construction, including large multifamily residential construction, will use electric heat pumps for all space and water heating beginning, and this will go into effect next year. They also, just 2 weeks ago, formally launched the process of, or approved a draft set of codes for residential energy, and that will be going forward to public comment with a final decision due later this year. It's very likely that the state of Washington will by the end of this year, have a requirement for all new construction to utilize electric heat pumps. In Oregon, at the state level, in addition to the climate protection program, the cap and trade law that's soon to go into effect, the legislature created a resilient, efficient buildings or rebuilding task force that's working. Actually, today they're having a public meeting that our Oregon staff is part of to identify and recommend policies that will help the state meet its climate goals by decarbonizing the building sector. Policies currently on the table range from improving efficiency requirements, which is the first place to start for both new and existing buildings, and creating and expanding programs to make climate solutions, including high efficiency electric heat pumps, more affordable and widely available. Climate solutions, along with dozens of other environmental and energy justice organizations, have been heavily involved in this process, as well as the Public Utility Commission's natural gas fact-finding investigation, or the Future of Gas docket. This process was intended to do 2 things. First, to analyze the potential bill impacts from limiting natural gas utilities' greenhouse gas emissions under the DEQ's climate protection program. And second, the proceeding was meant to help identify appropriate regulatory tools to mitigate potential customer impacts and accommodate utility action. Although it's not over yet, what the Future of Gas proceeding has made clear is that the gas utilities' plans to decarbonize using a combination of efficiency, which again, we're all for, renewable natural gas and hydrogen, is unrealistic, costly, and risky to ratepayers. In the Future of Gas docket, the vast majority of stakeholder comments have expressed concerns about the climate and economic risks of reliance on RNG, hydrogen, and other decarbonization innovations, as well as maintenance or expansion of the gas system. Dozens of organizations representing public health, ratepayers, businesses, local governments, the construction industry, affordable housing advocates, labor and environmental justice interests have submitted comments as part of the proceeding. And across the board, these comments overwhelmingly support a rapid downsizing of the gas system and express concerns about an over-reliance on nation-risky technologies like RNG and hydrogen. My Oregon colleagues, again, are actively participating in these public hearings, one of which is tonight, so she was unable to be here. In order to push the PUC to better synthesize stakeholder feedback and strengthen the final reports that reflects the urgency of the climate crisis and includes realistic pathways to decarbonizing our energy system, namely increasing energy efficiency and transitioning off of gas. But while those proceedings go forward, there are a number of things that cities and counties can do locally to move toward carbon-free buildings. First would be a resolution requiring all electric buildings, beginning with municipal buildings to lead by example, committing that all newly constructed buildings would be all electric, and also committing to a certain date by which existing buildings will be retrofitted to be fossil fuel free. Even beyond that would be a resolution affecting to require that all buildings community-wide be all electric, and a pathway to decarbonize existing buildings. Several cities in the area, including Portland and Seattle, are working on developing carbon-based building performance standards to reduce emissions from large existing buildings. And we think that once those policies are developed, they are likely to provide a good model for other cities to adopt as well. For existing residential customers, we're strong advocates for heat pump campaigns or policies to encourage people to retrofit their homes with heat pumps with funding to go toward subsidizing the cost for low-income and BIPOC communities. You could also consider green building incentives to offer expedited permitting to builders who choose clean energy. And depending on where you are in your franchise agreement, that can be an opportunity to negotiate more favorable terms with your gas utility to accelerate the move toward clean energy. I hope those suggestions are helpful and things that you will consider, and I'll be happy to answer any further questions you have.
I have one question. So in order to generate the renewable natural gas, they have to use fossil fuels. Is that correct? No, they don't have to use. Okay.
No, renewable natural gas comes from, so
Just
like when we treat the sewage.
Just from that.
Yeah, it's just collecting methane that's already, so that is actually a really important part of what we need to be doing society-wide is all of our processes that create methane, like dairies, like feedlots, like sewage treatment plants and landfills. We should be collecting all of that methane and utilizing it. But the point I think that he was making is that even if we were really good at that and we collected all of that, it would still only make up a small portion of the methane that we currently burn. And would be better used in industrial areas where it's hard to electrify, like steel and concrete manufacture. Anybody else? Any other?
Yes, I think that's exactly right.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. That was in depth. I appreciate it. This is basically the beginning of this conversation. We will be having further study sessions probably, and eventually get to the point where we bring something to a regular session to move to next steps. But we appreciate your time tonight, and yours, Brian. Thank you very much. All right.
All right, thank you.
After the study session, council will meet an executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel concerning legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. With that, I will adjourn our study session and we will move into our executive session. You guys need a